Well, hello there.
Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, before you, the Vortex Razor Gen III, 1 to 10. The optic. Influencers built up to God tier status. An optic so hyped, everyone thinks it's the only 1 to 10 in the game. An optic with the same fashion sense as Prince.
Prince had on it was like a Zorro type outfit. It had the ruffles that come down in the front. He had the big perm fluffed down and all that. And mustache and everything that was drawn on his face. And it looked like something that a figure skater would wear. You know what I'm saying?
An optic that, when we're honest with ourselves, brought both phenomenal options we love and gremlins we hate to the table. The new hotness that not everyone is still using or talking about since their initial reviews. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Vortex Razor Gen III review. Alright, let's go over the annoying specs. The weight is an impressive 21.5 ounces because that's the same exact weight as the Gen 2E. Your overall length is 10.1 inches, your width is 3.2 inches, and your height is 2.3 inches. Your magnification range is 1 to 10. The objective lens is a 24 millimeter and your tube diameter is 34 millimeter. This is a first focal plane optic with a field of view of 116 feet at 1x at 100 yards. At its maximum magnification of 10x, you'll get 11.7 feet at 100 yards. You have an eye relief of 3.6 inches, which we'll get to in a minute. The reticle is a very, very nice mill reticle at 1x. It gives you this nice T-shape for quick target acquisition, and as you increase magnification, you'll begin to see the Christmas tree style reticle that gives you on-the-fly adjustments to correct for wind based on how far your target is away from you. The adjustments are 0.1 Mrad, which is what everyone looks for. Turrets. They are cap turrets that have 30 milliradians of total travel. Battery life, I don't know. I can tell you what it says. I haven't changed the battery yet, but I don't really trust manufacturers when it comes to battery life, to be honest with you. Illumination, there's no night vision settings whatsoever, and it's visible through the entire illumination range. When you put on one, if you're in a partially lit room or cloudy day, you can see one. It's very visible to me, but the illumination is visible throughout the entire range, giving you no night vision capability whatsoever. Not that I think you'd use a Vortex 1 to 10 for night vision stuff, but just for those that care. Water resistance is listed at waterproof, and I'm going to take this brief moment to say to all manufacturers, test it and post it. Stop doing this waterproof stuff. It's lazy. If you're gonna want people to pick up your optic for contracts or trust it, you need to post what the depth is. There's some companies that it doesn't matter if it's 11 feet, 33 feet, or 1 foot, they're gonna post it. So it's your responsibility, I don't care what company it is, to post what the water resistance level is. Stop putting waterproof, it's not true. Just put the depth that it's tested to. It's very simple. You can get a bucket, you can throw it in a pool. I don't care. You have access to this stuff. You're multi-million-dollar optics companies. All right? Just test the optic. It's not hard.
Do it!
The parallax is fixed at 100 or 150 yards. I'm not sure. Vortex says 150. A lot of people have said 100. I don't know. I keep getting conflicted information. Let's just say it's 100 because that's probably what it is, but it might be 150. I'm not sure. I don't have any target markers at 150 yards to test it. All right, on to turrets. Controls, throw direction, and magnification range. Your turrets are capped with these really solid knurled caps, which is good. And these turrets are very, very solid. I really like these turrets. They're low profile. They are not locking, but they're low profile and they're very, very positive. As you click them, we're just gonna go up 2 and down 2 so I don't mess my zero up. Not the most audible, but definitely very tactile. and you feel like you're moving past a detent. It's not smushy at all. It's very, very precise, and they're moderate effort to turn. They're not going to turn on accident. There's a nice little up indicator there, and of course you have your numbers on the turret so you can see where you're going. This is kind of a set it and forget it, but if you had to dial for some strange reason, which I wouldn't recommend, especially with the reticle, you can do that. Side turret is the same, and it indicates via an L or R which direction you can go, which is nice.
Nice.
Onto the illumination turret. You have to pull it out, and there will be a silver ring to indicate that it's out, and you can move it freely in any direction. There is some tension, and you're definitely passing a nice detent, so turning it's very, very positive. And there's an off stop in between each setting, which is good, and you can go all the way around if you want. There's no weird Steiner P4XI stuff going on. And you can turn it on, push it in, lock it, use it, or turn it off, push it in, lock it, and use it. Whatever is your preference, but it'll keep it secured while you're using it. And then if you need to make an adjustment, you just pull the dial out and you can change your illumination as needed. All right, controls are very basic, obviously. The turrets are really, really easy to use. There's nothing that's gonna be difficult, just as long as you follow the directions and you can read.
What's it like to get your ass beat by someone that knows how to read?
It does come with a throw lever, but it does not come with scope caps or a bra or anything like that. It comes with these really, really cheap, the lowest possible effort little plastic covers, and for a $2,000 optic, that is unacceptable. There are multiple companies out there that come in at a much better price point that have something to put on your scope to protect it. So I know it's an LPVO, I know most people don't care about that, but without scope caps, without the little bra thingy that Trigicon gives you, or some sort of cover, I don't understand what their rationale is with that. They're like, oh, we gave you this throw lever. Yeah, cool. What's gonna protect my $2,000 glass? That's the question. And even though other companies don't give you necessarily quality stuff that you would want, especially for hard use, they're giving you something versus just, meh, we don't need to, our stuff's really good. That's not a good look for anybody. Those little pieces of plastic are a joke. But you are supplied with a throw lever, which makes your adjustment very, very easy. And it's not as high effort as the Razor Gen II. This is a welcome change, and everybody liked that. So it has a very, very nice left to right throw, and it's very easy to select what you want and stop with just a little bit of finger pressure, but not so light that you're blazing through it or it gets knocked off easy. And luckily, if it does get knocked off 1 or 2 power from what you have it dialed in at, no big deal, it's a first focal plane reticle. On the back of the ring here, you'll see a very, very small punch mark, which is what that is. And it's very easy to see 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 through 10 happen pretty quick. 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. There's no marker for 9, but you're really just probably gonna use it at 8 versus hunting for 9 between 8 and 10, so it's not really that big a deal. If you can't do it at 8, dial it up to 10. All right, next we're moving on to eye relief and eye box. All right, we're gonna get to a really serious sticking point for a lot of people, and there's gonna be a lot of debate in the comments, and I understand that, but we gotta cover it anyway.
Your booze mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer.
Eye relief. Eye relief on this optic at maximum magnification, honestly from 6 to 10, it starts to be very, very precise. Your head has to be perfectly placed when the optic is on 10x. I'm gonna roll in some footage here. It's not the best footage. I'm not a professional optic reviewer. I'm a regular guy. And I don't have a jig. I'm just kind of holding it up. But you can see how hard I have to fight to keep the little GoPro behind the proper eye relief as I dial it up. and it does change. You do get scope shadow at 10x. Based on where you are in the magnification, the eye relief starts to tighten at 4x. So the second you hit 4x all the way to 10x, you'll notice that your head placement is key. Now, two things. One, when you're mounting the optic, do so while it's at 10x. Make sure your stock is where you normally use it. Make sure you check it in the prone position, in the kneeling position, in the supported position, whatever. But make sure your eye relief is good at 10x, and then finalize your mounting solution by tightening it down or whatever. After you've done that, then dial it out to 1x and check it again, and it should be good. But if you just do it at 1x, you might find that you're going to be hunting for the proper head position, which you're going to do anyway, but it's going to be even more exaggerated if you've not done it 10x to 1x. If you do it 1x, mount it and say, oh, it's good enough. It's not, I promise. The second you put this optic on 10x, your head must be perfectly placed at the eye relief. You move your face at all, left to right, front to back, a millimeter or two, it's a wrap. There's a lot of guys that are complaining about eye relief at 10x and even 8x. Now, another thing to consider is you're going to be in a supported position when you're using 10x. Much of a sticking point as it is at 10x, you are not running and gunning at 10x. It's not happening. All right, so I don't want to hear arguments like, well, when I'm running and gunning at 8x or 10x, it's not happening. All right, we're not doing that. Don't start that. It's not a thing. All right. If you've got to get up and move, bump it down to 3, bump it down to 2, whatever you got to do, or rip it all the way down to 1x. But if you got to start shooting on the move, you're not using 10x. Eye box. This eye box is not as good as the Razor 1 to 6. This eye box is not as good as the Razor 1 to 6. I know a lot of reviewers said that. It is not true at all. The eye relief is slightly less in practical application, I don't care what the book says, and your eye box is tighter. This is a 34 millimeter tube optic. It should not have that issue, but it does. And you'll notice that your eye box gets tighter starting at 3 to 4x. You start noticing it kind of draw in a little bit, get that tube effect, and you're like, what's going on here? You go to 6x and it's a little tighter, and you're like, huh? And as you start dialing past 6, 7 through 10, it gets very unforgiving. Very, very unforgiving. And again, head placement is key. So when mounting an LPVO in general, you want to minimize as many variables as possible. If that means putting a rubber band as reference for your face, or some rubber, or soft Velcro, something as a reference point for your face if you're having trouble, then do that. But this optic is particularly stubborn about its eye relief and eye box. And anyone who tells you otherwise isn't telling the truth. There's been multiple people at the range I've handed this to that are like, oh, that's a great optic, blah, blah, blah. They didn't have one. They were just repeating things that they said. I handed it to them and they'd say, what is this eye relief?
Damn, like, what is this eye relief? But I don't know.
What is this eye box? Wow, it's not as good as people said. The reason I'm being so specific and hitting this point so hard is because this is an expensive optic. $2,000 is not a lot of money to some people, but to most people it is, especially in these times. And if you listen to the puff pieces, you're gonna get led astray and you're gonna be very upset with your purchase. I'm trying to make sure that I may be being a little harsh here, but I want everybody to understand that these are two limitations, very serious limitations on this optic. And it's still functional. You can still use it, still employ it. But if you don't know that going in and then you start trying to use it, you're going to get frustrated with it and upset. So just understand that these are important things, important points of concern. And if you can use the optic in spite of those things, great. But just understand that those are points. Glass clarity and image quality. Glass clarity. Looking through this is wonderful. It's always a great optic to look through. The glass is very, very nice. It's Vortex's glass, which comes from the Low factory. It's their HD glass that they use in the Razor line. Very, very good glass. You're not going to really find a lot of complaints about the glass. Image quality. Image quality is good. Light transmission is good. You will see some fisheye at 1x. I know some of you are in comments in the lie detector light switch video, which I'm going to roll in now while I'm talking. But there's definitely some fisheye at 1x. And I've adjusted the diopter at the rear, the eyepiece, right here. And it did not clean it up. There's still fisheye. Now you can grossly exaggerate the fisheye with the rear diopter, but it's still present. So no matter what adjustments I did, yes, you can make it more severe, but there's still a very prevalent fisheye at 1x. With this optic, it's slight. So you'll notice it when you're doing close quarters stuff, you're clearing your house, or you're doing CQC, or any of this other stuff, but that's when you'll see it. You're not gonna see it at the range. You're not even gonna see it shooting targets quickly at 15 yards. It's not gonna be a thing. But when you start moving through a building, or you're trying to problem solve through your optic or scan through your optic, it will be there. It is a distraction. And if you put a lot of elevation in your turret, which is highly unlikely, I want to preface this, it's very unlikely that you're going to use this that way. But let's say you have a lot more skill than I do in long range precision, and you want to get a little more distance out of your platform, then if you dial into it, it's going to, at maximum magnification or increased magnification, it's going to start softening and bending the images. C does, in his review, does a really, really good job demonstrating how the images get softer at targets from, I think, 70 yards all the way out to 1,000. So he does a really, really good job showing how things change in an urban environment, which is good. So glass clarity, high points. The image quality is going to be slightly less than a lot of competitors due to the fisheye and dialing it up. You're going to get some softer images at maximum magnification as well, regardless of how much elevation you put in it, whether it's one click, no clicks, or anything like that. You'll notice the lack of parallax adjustment really holds it back. But then having a parallax adjustment also defeats the purpose of having an LPVO in the first place. All right, moving on to the reticle. The reticle is brilliant. I think this is by far one of the best reticles I've ever used. Not perfect, but it is by far one of the best reticles I've ever used. It's busy enough to give you the information that you need to make precise shots, and it's not busy enough so you can see what's going on. It's also translucent. I do really like how it's illuminated, and overall I have very, very few, if any, complaints about the reticle. The ranging feature is okay. I don't necessarily like where it's placed, but they gave it to you. Most Vortex optics don't do that, and most people, including myself, don't really know how to do all that mil measurement math on the fly like Rex Reviews does. I could see an argument for the placement of the ranging, but honestly they did give it to you, so it's kind of a 50-50 thing for me, kind of in the middle category, but at least they gave it to you. The reticle in general is, I think, one of the best on the market right now today because of how translucent it is. You can put it over a target, still see what you're shooting at, and you can hold off into distance. It's a really effective reticle, and I'm very happy that they went with it. I think moving forward, a lot of people are going to jump on the T-shaped reticle at 1x, which I think is brilliant. And for my eye, it's much preferred. It helps me pick up targets quickly, although I will say at 1x, I need the illumination on at 1x to be my fastest or hit the targets perfectly. Luckily, it's daylight bright and it's a small dot, so it's not too difficult for me to make that adjustment. And it's not unusable with the illumination off. I'm not as fast or confident when I'm shooting it with the illumination off at 1x. But I love first focal plane. It's my preference. Very little guesswork involved. It eliminates a lot of variables for me. The reticle is very intelligent, and I really like the direction that they went with the reticle in general. You could make an argument to move the ranging feature, but overall I'm very, very pleased with the reticle at any magnification. Illumination. This is aim point bright. You can make this thing gross, just turn it all the way up, and it's good. Illumination dial goes all the way up to 11. I'm not sure if I mentioned that earlier, but it goes all the way up to 11. You can make it nuclear bright, burn your retinas, and have a great day. It's very easily visible during the day. The brightest part of the day, sun going down right in your eyes part of the day. You're not going to have a complaint with the illumination unless you're trying to do some weird night vision setup I don't think would work in the first place. What category does it fit in? 3-gun/hunting, tactical, or military grade? So some companies have military grade optics. You're looking at Steiner, Trijicon. I'm sure there's some other ones. Schmidt and Bender is used by the military, so I think all their optics are military grade, but they may or may not be. Someone's going to slap me in the comments. Vortex doesn't have a military grade or tactical grade for their optics. There's plenty of Viper PST Gen 2s downrange. There's Vortex 1-6s downrange. And I'm positive these are making their way down there as well. I'm comfortable saying it's a good tactical optic. I don't know if it would meet the requirements for a military optic, but my feelings are irrelevant because there's military dudes using it now downrange. And I promise you they don't give a shit about what I'm saying on YouTube. Definitely tactical use. As far as military, that's going to be up to the end user, and there are dudes that are much more qualified to speak on that are currently using them downrange, so I would seek those sources out if they are available to you. All right, so we're gonna do what it's good at, what it's bad at, and then we're gonna close it out. What it's good at. With the magnification range and being first focal plane, you can make adjustments on the fly, not have to worry about your zero, and just worry about ranging your target and effectively engaging it. You're also getting quality construction. The Razor line is known for its ruggedness and quality pieces. The glass is quality and the turrets are quality. I know I mentioned the reticle before, but this is honestly, this is one of my favorite reticles I've ever used, and the illumination is solid. I do not see anyone really having significant issues using the reticle or the illumination in any environment. Again, unless you're going to set it up with some weird night vision combination. I've learned not to say that no one's going to do that because someone will do it.
It ain't got nothing like me, you know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, that's what real hating is all about, man.
And to use borrowed terms that smarter people than me created, this optic is at home on a general purpose rifle or GPR or some sort of improvised SPR. We're talking like a 16 or 18 inch where you're trying to force it to do things it probably shouldn't, but if it's an improv SPR, I guess, which more often than not is just when somebody throws a bipod on it, then you could use this optic for that. A good category because the reticle is legitimately quick at 1x, but you do need the illumination on, in my opinion. There's going to be guys that say, I don't need the illumination. If you're shooting at dark targets, you're going to want that illumination because you're going to lose where that target is specifically in the T of the reticle. So the illumination just really helps contrast the target, and most people are quick with red dots, so it gives you that speed advantage with the support of the T-shaped reticle at 1x. Another thing it's good at is it's the same weight and length as a Gen 2E, which a lot of people shrug off. I'd honestly kind of like to see it a little heavier because that adds to robustness. I'm slightly concerned that a 34 millimeter tube optic is the same exact weight as a 30 millimeter tube optic, but Vortex razors have demonstrated that they're hard use. So I'm happy that they made a similar optic, so guys that were like, oh man, I always wanted a razor that was first focal plane, all you have to do is swap out your mount and it's the same weight and footprint as the Gen 2E, and then you can take your Gen 2E with the mount and sell it, or you can put it on another rifle. I really need to ring this home. I hit it already, but another thing it's great with is the throw. The throw is so much smoother. It's just night and day better versus the 1-6. And you'd want a second focal plane faster because your zero is not true throughout the magnification range. So I'd much rather have a second focal plane with a faster throw than a first focal plane, because it doesn't really matter. With the first focal, you can take the same shot at 3x that you can take at 10x. But the throw is much smoother. They listen to the community and they made that adjustment, and it's not so soft that you can just flop it over. It's deliberate, but very smooth. I also like that the scope body is really thin when you're aiming down the LPVO, and it kind of just disappears and gets out of your way. It lets you look through the optic once you have your sight picture, eye relief, and eye box set. You can just look down and go to work, which is nice. All right, what it's bad at, having good eye relief at 10x. The eye relief at 10x is awful and inexcusable. There's a lot of optics that get progressively worse. In fact, I would submit to you that almost every optic gets worse as you dial through the magnification range. But the precedent set by the 1:6 is a high bar that this optic does not meet at its maximum magnification. The fisheye and not having a flat image at 1x is a big detractor for me. And I also think it speaks to the quality of the glass. And I know some people are going to say fisheye is not a big deal with the amount of fisheye that this optic has. I disagree. I feel that it's not a massive detractor when you're using it, but an optic that's this price point with these features and all this other stuff can't afford to miss on something so simple as having fisheye at 1x. It's just, it's a kick in the nuts. This optic's very expensive, and it should perform to the level that these other expensive optics perform to. My Trijicon 1:8 doesn't have fisheye at 1x. And a lot of people drag that optic because it's not an attacker, but both the Trijicon and the attacker don't have fisheye at 1x. So if they can figure it out, especially since you get the same glass as the Trijicon from the low factory, you can probably cut out that fisheye portion and have them do it better. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an optics manufacturer, but it's the same glass from the same factory. You'd think they could make adjustments that they'll hopefully make in a Razor Gen 3 Mod 1. I don't know what they call it. Gen 3E? I don't know. Pitch when shouldering. So there's 3 planes of movement. There's pitch, yaw, and roll, right? So the pitch is your up and down alignment. And the pitch always seems off when I bring this optic up. There's been multiple times where I bring it up and it's not quite right, and it drives me insane. Consistency. I have never with any other optic shuffled my head so much. I've messed with the eye relief, I've messed with the optic, I even moved it back just a touch, re-zeroed it, and it still gives me grief. Like, I've never messed with an optic so much in my life. Another thing it's bad at is images are soft at ranges outside of the fixed parallax, which would be fixed easily with a parallax adjustment knob, but then you're starting to fight with, what is this optic for? Is it an LPVO, or should I just get a scope? And as we already discussed, the eye box gets very, very tight as you increase the magnification from 4x on. So at 4x, the eye box is tighter than a lot of 30mm tube optics, and it starts to progressively get a lot tighter, a lot faster. And that's not uncommon for first focal plane optics, even 3 to 15s or something like that, once you start getting to the top end of the magnification range. And the eye box tightens on my Trijicon, it tightens on the attacker, it tightens on everything. But the degree to which it tightens on this optic, especially with the standard that was set with the Vortex Razor Gen 2 and Gen 2E, you have to temper your expectations, because what was sold to you was it's the same, but it's not. It really isn't. It's not something that I think people should dive in head first with and expect the same results. Also, this is a conversation I had with Flying Turtle. I think this also has something to do with the pitch issue that I'm having when I'm shouldering the rifle and trying to get on the optic. Is the optic itself is not very well balanced, and it kind of contributes to how you're throwing the rifle around. It's not going to be massively disproportionate, like you're hanging a suppressor and a D-ball and all this other stuff on the front of your gun and it starts becoming nose heavy, but it is sort of an issue where most optics do have a balance to them, and you're just adding weight over the top of the rifle, whereas this kind of shifts a little bit in the other direction. So it's not something that's unusable, but it's not balanced like other optics are. So it's kind of a weird situation to be in. Now, I know plenty of you are super happy with me at this point. I'm going to be real with you. This optic probably should have been a 1:8. And a lot of companies are messing with 1:10, and I know a lot of guys are going to be like, it's the future of optics. But Night Force had a 1:10 project that they abandoned. There's a lot of optic companies that are very, very capable that haven't done a 1:10, and I don't think you're going to see many more when the design challenges are realized by a lot of these companies, just like Night Force. If Night Force didn't make a 1:10, there's probably a reason, and people can hem and haw about how much Night Forces cost, but I don't think anyone's going to question their manufacturing capability or their ruggedness. So a lot of guys are happy with 1:8s and find 1:8s very functional. And it's not that I don't like this optic, but because of the eye relief issue and the eye box issue being so precise at 10x, even when I mounted the optic at 10x and I made all those adjustments and I did everything I possibly could to give this optic a fair shot, you seldom see me use this optic at 10x. You'll see the throw lever in almost every position except this one. You'll see it up here, you'll see it over here, but you won't see it over there because the 10x is such a struggle fest to try to use right. And it's very frustrating to try to get on target and press shots. I've definitely done it and have used it, so it's not like 10x is unusable, it's just I have to be in the perfect position to use it, and instead of fighting the optic, I just run it at 8 or 6. And one of the most real comments that started a lot of controversy is, I love the Razor Gen 3, it's the best 1:6 I've ever used. And a lot of guys don't use this optic past 6x, and that's why, is the 10x eye relief and eye box issues. But I'm not gonna just shit on Vortex here. They took a chance. They gave us an optic that's very well constructed, has pretty clear glass, and it has a lot of good features in it, and a stellar reticle. To give us all of those wonderful options in this package that's the same weight and the same profile on the rifle, minus the tube diameter, as the 1:6 second focal plane. So they listened to a lot of user feedback, they made a first focal plane, they gave you a beautiful magnification range. It's not necessarily usable at the top end, but they gave you the options. 1:10 is a huge undertaking, and there's a reason that other companies have abandoned it. So again, they took that shot. I'm not saying they missed the mark, but I will say it's not as perfect as the influencers sold it as. The Illumination, Reticle, and Clarity make it a solid performer. Those alone can carry it to the finish line, but there are points of concern that people either were too lazy to check, read a data sheet for an ad read, or were just trying to sell you something. And I bought that hype. I'll be the first one to tell you that I bought that hype. Once you master the optic though, it'll give you the ability to push your rifle out to its maximum effective range with ease. And that's at 6x, that's at 8x or 10x. You can really stretch these rifles out now because of the capability that the reticle and the magnification gives you. However, to be 100% transparent, I know more people that have purchased these and sold them for something else than the people who have kept them and love them. And I think it's also important to say optics and reticles will always be subjective. You're gonna find plenty of people that say this optic fits me, this is what I wanted, and even though it has the fisheye at 1x and even though it has the restrictions at 10x, this optic is for me. And again, I think influencers really oversold this optic, and some of those same guys are no longer using it. You'll see little clips here and there or something like that, but then they say, hey, this is my go-to rifle, and it's absent the Vortex Razor 1:10. There's guys that really propped it up and they disappeared from their channels. So during the initial release window, you see a lot of exposure. And then as time goes on, you see less and less people running these with any sort of longevity. But instead of just giving people the facts and information to come to a conclusion themselves, either information was redacted or glazed over as not to damage their relationship with Vortex or whatever reason, I'm not saying every action is malicious, but what I will tell you is I think it's very important for everybody to go in clear-headed, look at the downfalls, look at the benefits, and say, this optic will or will not fit my needs. I think it's important to convey to you, ultimately, that this optic is not the god-tier optic that they sold it to you as. It's on my primary fighting rifle. And as much as I fight with it, and as much as I really don't like the fisheye at 1x, and really hate the tightness of the eye box, I still really, really like and enjoy this optic. I don't know if I'm gonna buy a second one, and I don't know if it's gonna stay on this rifle, but I am going to keep it, and I am going to continue to use it, and I have had very good success with it so far. It's zeroed very quickly. The turrets are on. The illumination is great. The reticle is a breath of fresh air. But there are downsides to this optic, and if you're buying it blind, watch the C-Does review. Watch 9-hole reviews, watch Sage Dynamics review. Get a bunch of different people that have used the optic and put it through its paces. Because if you just watch puff pieces, then you're gonna fall into the same trap that I did. And you're gonna have the same anger and frustration that I did when you shell out $2,000 of your hard-earned money. But after I took it through my house a million times, after I went to some indoor stuff and pushed it around, when I started shooting quickly with it, when I started putting it on the bench and trying to smack stuff at distance at 10x, I really started to see where this optic fell down for me. And no optic that I've run into yet is perfect. Every optic has a downside. So you just have to decide whether this is for you or not. But if you just ride the hype train and think this is God tier, you're gonna have the same results I did, and you're gonna be frustrated. I think it's a very good optic with some flaws, and you have to decide whether those flaws are acceptable to you, whether they matter or don't matter to you before you make this purchase. And there's guys that are gonna buy it and think it's perfect. There's guys that are gonna buy it and hate it and sell it, like I've seen pretty often. I think if it works for you and you can run it and the sticking points are not sticking points for you, or they're not as severe, you'll be very, very well served with this optic. I am struggling to find a place with it, but I'm not getting rid of it. I will use this for something. It may migrate to a 16-inch, but right now it's on my primary fighting rifle. So it's not so bad that I'm ripping it off and selling it. I'm keeping it, but I have to figure out what I'm gonna do with it and see where it fits in the best. As always, thanks for watching. Take care out there.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go home and put some water in Buck Nasty's mama's dish. Good evening.